$450,000. That's the fine my HOA president faced for spray painting my Navy boat at 2 a.m., like some petty criminal. Karen Prescott believed her wealth and influence made her untouchable, that she could destroy the one thing I hold sacred, a tribute to my fallen brothers, without any consequences. This neighborhood dictator had been bullying residents for years, but she seriously underestimated the wrong veteran. When I caught her red-handed defacing my most treasured possession, I knew this was the start of a battle. What followed completely shattered her reign of terror and shocked the entire community. How could one boat bring down the most feared woman in Bayside Cove? Keep watching, as this revenge story is going to blow you away. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. My name is Nathan Harper, but everyone calls me Nate. I'm 38, a former Navy officer turned freelance marine engineer. After a dozen years serving my country on the ocean, I put down roots in Bayside Cove, Florida, a peaceful coastal town where retirees enjoy their coffee while watching pelicans dive for their breakfast. The homes here are modest but impeccably cared for, with lawns so neat they'd rival any golf course. Palm trees line the streets, and there's always a soft breeze carrying the salty scent from the nearby marina. It's exactly the kind of place you'd expect to spend your golden years, watching sunsets streak the sky with oranges and pinks. The centerpiece of my property is a small dock behind my house where my pride and joy rests, a 1972 Navy patrol boat I purchased 3 years ago at a government surplus auction. She's no beauty queen, with patches of rust and faded gray paint, but to me, she's priceless. This boat is identical to the one I served on during my last deployment, where I lost 2 close friends in a brutal storm off the coast of Somalia. Every morning, I sit on her deck with my coffee, running my fingers over the worn controls and remembering Tommy and Marcus. This boat is more than metal, it's a memorial, a sanctuary, and the only thing that keeps their memory alive in my everyday life. The local marina once offered me $20,000 for her, but I'd sooner sell my own kidney. Then Karen Prescott stormed into my life like a hurricane, dressed in a designer pantsuit. At 52, Karen is the self-appointed queen of Bayside Cove's Homeowners Association, a woman who treats neighborhood rules like sacred law. She lives in the largest house in the community, a sprawling 3-story Mediterranean mansion bigger than some shopping malls. Her perfectly styled blonde hair never budges, even in hurricane winds, and she has a way of looking at you like you're an unwelcome nuisance. Karen inherited a fortune when her parents passed away, retired early from banking, and apparently decided her life's mission was to make everyone else's existence as tightly controlled and miserable as possible. Our war started with an official HOA notice dropped in my mailbox one Tuesday morning. The letter, typed on fancy letterhead, bore Karen's signature, flourished like she was signing the Declaration of Independence. It read, "Dear Mr. Harper, it has come to the attention of the Bayside Cove Homeowners Association that you are harboring an eyesore on your property that violates our community aesthetic standards. The rusted vessel behind your residence must be removed within 30 days, or you will face escalating fines and potential legal action." I read it 3 times, my coffee growing cold as the ridiculousness of it sunk in. My boat was parked legally behind my house and caused 0 issues except for Karen's fragile sense of order. Trying to be reasonable, I knocked on her door that afternoon, dressed in my best polo and wearing a diplomatic smile. She answered, flanked by her 2 perfectly groomed poodles. I explained that my boat was legally parked, properly registered, and deeply meaningful to me. I even offered to install decorative screening if the view from her bedroom window was a concern. Karen listened with a patronizing smile, the kind you give a child who insists they'll grow up to be a dinosaur. "Mr. Harper," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "I'm sure your little tugboat has sentimental value, but this is a respectable neighborhood. We have standards. That piece of junk is dragging down everyone's property values, and it needs to go." The word tugboat made my jaw tighten, but I stayed calm and told her my boat wasn't going anywhere. That's when Karen declared war. 2 weeks later, I woke up to what looked like a crime scene behind my house. Someone had spray-painted bright red graffiti all over my boat's hull, with the word junk in letters 3 feet tall across the starboard side. The navigation lights I had carefully restored were smashed. Glass shattered like confetti across the dock. A crowbar had been used to gouge dents and scratches into the HOA repairs that would cost thousands. The waterproof coating I'd applied just last month was scraped off in long, deliberate gouges, exposing bare metal. The damage was so severe and personal, it felt like someone had vandalized a grave. Standing there in my bathrobe and slippers, clutching my coffee, I felt the mug slip through my numb fingers, shattering on the dock and sending shards into the water. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. All I saw was Tommy's smiling face from our last deployment, laughing as he polished the brass fittings on our boat's controls. The memory hit like a physical blow, and I had to steady myself on the dock railing. This wasn't just vandalism, it was desecration. Whoever did this had violated something sacred, and they would pay. As I surveyed the wreckage, I immediately started photographing everything with my phone, capturing every angle to document the precision of the destruction and the costly equipment that had been ruined. What really caught my eye was something shining in the morning sun near the stern of the boat. A pair of expensive leather gloves, the kind with designer stitching that probably cost more than most people spend on groceries in a week. They were smeared with red paint and had been carelessly dropped right beside my boat, like the vandal was in such a rush they didn't even notice. I carefully took photos of the gloves exactly where they lay before slipping them into a plastic bag, already knowing whose perfectly manicured hands they would fit. That evening, I sent Karen a detailed email with all the photos attached, including close-ups of the gloves, demanding $8,500 to cover the repair costs. Her reply came within an hour and it was nothing like her usual smug politeness. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she wrote, but I could practically feel the panic radiating through the screen. She added, "Maybe you should invest in better security for your junk pile instead of throwing wild accusations at respected members of this community." Her message was clear. She knew I knew it was her, but she was gambling I couldn't prove it. The next morning brought both vindication and complications. My neighbor, Hector Alvarez, showed up at my door at 7 a.m., practically bouncing with excitement. "Nate, you've got to see this," he said, leading me to his garage where his security system monitor displayed crystal clear footage from the night of the vandalism. There, in high definition, was Karen Prescott herself, dressed in black and moving stealthily around my boat like some kind of suburban ninja. The timestamp read 2:15 a.m., and the footage showed her spray painting my boat, smashing the navigation lights with a crowbar, and dropping those expensive gloves in her frantic escape. "I've been waiting years for something like this," Hector grinned, saving copies of the footage to multiple backup drives. "That woman has made life miserable for half the neighborhood, and now we've got her dead to rights." But Karen wasn't finished escalating our conflict. 3 days after I sent her the email about the gloves, another official HOA notice arrived, this time demanding a $500 fine for violating community standards and failing to maintain property according to their guidelines. She'd cited a completely different section of the bylaws, one so vague it could be used to penalize someone for having the wrong mailbox color or planting flowers that bloomed off-season. Karen was weaponizing the HOA rulebook, finding new legal angles to attack me while pretending her vandalism never happened. The real bombshell came the following week by certified mail, a property survey claiming the land where my boat was docked didn't belong to me. According to this official-looking document from a company called Precision Property Solutions, my property line ended 15 feet short of the waterline, meaning my boat was allegedly parked on community property without permission. At first glance, the survey looked legitimate enough to fool most people. But when I compared it to my original deed and the survey I received when I bought the house, the differences were glaring. Someone had taken my true property boundaries and shifted them inland, effectively stealing 15 feet of waterfront that legally belonged to me. The forgery was sophisticated but still a forgery. I immediately reached out to Samantha Torres, a 29-year-old legal aide at the city planning department. Sam had attended several home meetings where Karen publicly humiliated residents over trivial infractions and had developed a personal grudge against our neighborhood's self-appointed dictator. When I showed her both the real and fake surveys, her eyes lit up like a prosecutor who just found the smoking gun. "This is completely illegal," she said, spreading the documents across her desk and pointing out subtle but unmistakable alterations. Whoever created this fake survey has committed multiple felonies of fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and probably more. The real question is, can we prove Karen was behind it? Sam agreed to help me research Karen's background and investigate any patterns of similar behavior. Meanwhile, Karen launched what she called a neighborhood beautification campaign, going door to door with a petition demanding I remove my unsightly vessel from what she now claimed was community property. Her pitch was masterful at telling neighbors my boat was dragging down their home values by thousands and that my refusal to comply showed blatant disregard for community standards. Several residents signed immediately, either because they believed her lies or were terrified of becoming her next target. Karen had spent years building a reputation as someone who could make life miserable for anyone who crossed her, and that reputation was working in her favor. People feared her retaliation more than they cared about the truth. The psychological pressure was becoming unbearable. Neighbors who used to wave when I walked by now crossed the street to avoid me. I could feel their disapproval weighing down on me like a physical burden. My evening walks through the neighborhood turned into exercises in social isolation, with conversations abruptly stopping when I approached and resuming in whispers once I passed. Even worse, my business began to suffer. 2 potential clients canceled contracts after digging into my background and discovering my ongoing feud with the HOA. Karen's campaign was systematically destroying both my reputation and livelihood, all while she maintained complete plausible deniability about her role in the vandalism. But Karen made a critical mistake during what she thought was a private conversation outside the community center. I was picking up my mail when I spotted her talking intently with a man in an expensive suit. Their body language screamed secrecy, as if they were discussing something they didn't want overheard. When Karen noticed me watching, she immediately cut the conversation short and hurried away, but not before I discreetly snapped a photo with my phone. The man looked familiar, and later that evening, it hit me why. He was the same person whose signature appeared on the fraudulent property survey. Karen had been careless enough to meet her co-conspirator in public, giving me photographic proof of their connection. That night, I spent hours combing through public records, home meeting minutes, and neighborhood gossip, searching for any pattern of questionable behavior in Karen's past. What I uncovered was a goldmine of complaints, warnings, and red flags painting a clear picture of systematic abuse of power. 3 previous HOA board members had resigned in protest over Karen's autocratic style. There were documented cases of residents being fined for violations that existed only in Karen's imagination. One particularly damning email thread revealed Karen arguing with the association's accountant over reimbursements for expenses unrelated to community maintenance. Despite being warned twice about financial irregularities, she had somehow managed to cling to her position as presidenta even with multiple formal complaints against her. The pieces were falling into place. Karen's attack on my boat was just the latest chapter in a long history of neighborhood tyranny. She had grown bolder with each brazen power grab because no one had ever challenged her systematically or gathered comprehensive evidence against her. But now she was facing someone with military training, strategic planning skills, and the patience to build an airtight case. Karen thought she was dealing with just another intimidated homeowner, but she was about to learn she had picked the wrong enemy. I had video proof of her vandalism, evidence of her document forgery, and a growing file of her other crimes. The war she'd started was about to turn in my favor. Armed with Hector's security footage and the forged property survey, I decided it was time to go on the offensive. I spent an entire weekend preparing a thorough presentation documenting every questionable decision Karen had made as HOA president over the past 3 years. The evidence was damning: unauthorized expenditures, conflicts of interest, fraudulent documents, and a clear pattern of harassment aimed at residents who dared to challenge her authority. At exactly 9 a.m. on Monday, I uploaded the presentation to our neighborhood's online forum, timed perfectly for when most residents would be checking their phones over coffee. The post was titled "The Truth About Your HOA President, a Video Evidence Inside," and it included Hector's crystal clear footage of Karen vandalizing my boat. The response was immediate and explosive. Within hours, my post had dozens of comments from neighbors sharing their own stories of Karen's abuse of power. Margaret Chen described how Karen fined her $300 for planting roses that were supposedly the wrong shade of pink even though they matched flowers in Karen's own garden. Robert Williams revealed he'd been forced to repaint his entire house because Karen claimed the original color violated community standards, despite it matching several other homes. Most shocking of all, elderly Walter Grayson stepped forward with documents showing Karen had systematically targeted residents she disliked with frivolous fines and harassment campaigns designed to force them to sell their homes and leave. The video evidence of Karen spray painting my boat gave other victims the courage to finally speak out after years of abuse. Karen's retaliation was swift and vicious. Instead of addressing the allegations or acknowledging the video evidence, she doubled down on her attacks against me. She filed formal complaint with the county zoning board, claiming I was operating an illegal marina on residential property. She even contacted the Coast Guard, alleging my vessel was improperly moored and potentially. Most devastatingly, Karen somehow convinced a county inspector to issue an environmental violation notice, falsely claiming my boat was leaking fuel into the water. This alleged spill would require costly remediation and could trigger massive federal fines. The inspector's report was clearly fabricated. My boat hadn't been fueled in months, and there was no evidence of contamination, but battling the violation through red tape would take weeks. This fake environmental violation was Karen's masterstroke. It gave her legal grounds to demand immediate action. She filed an emergency injunction to have my boat impounded pending an environmental assessment, arguing that every day it remained in the water posed a threat to marine life and water quality. The injunction hearing was scheduled for the following Friday, leaving me less than a week to prepare a defense against charges that could lead to the permanent loss of my most prized possession. Karen had cornered me, forcing me to fight for my boat on multiple fronts simultaneously. She clearly expected the pressure to break my resolve. But she had underestimated both my determination and my growing network of allies. Sam Torres worked tirelessly researching legal precedents on environmental violations and uncovered that the inspector who cited my boat had a history of filing false reports in exchange for under-the-table payments. More alarmingly, she found evidence linking the inspector to payments from Karen's husband's construction company for favorable inspection reports on building projects that should have failed. Meanwhile, Hector canvassed the neighborhood with his camera, documenting the actual condition of my boat and interviewing neighbors willing to testify there had never been any fuel smell or visible contamination around my dock. My breakthrough came from an unexpected source: Tyler Prescott, Karen's 19-year-old nephew. Since the night of the vandalism, Tyler had been acting increasingly nervous and agitated. I often saw him lurking around the marina at odd hours, constantly glancing over his shoulder as if expecting to be caught. When Walter mentioned seeing Tyler near my boat on the night Karen attacked, I realized Tyler might have been her accomplice. His agent build fit the profile for carrying tools or acting as a lookout, and his guilty behavior suggested he was burdened by a heavy secret. I decided to approach Tyler carefully. Waiting until I saw him alone at the marina's bait shop, I started a casual conversation. "Hey Tyler," I said, keeping my tone friendly and non-threatening. "How's college going?" His reaction was immediate and revealing. He went pale, stammered about being busy, and couldn't hold eye contact for more than a few seconds. When I casually mentioned someone had vandalized my boat and asked if he'd noticed anything unusual that night, Tyler practically jumped out of his skin. "I don't know anything about your boat," he said nervously, backing toward the door. "I wasn't even there that night." The problem was, I hadn't specified which night the vandalism occurred. His panicked and overly specific denial told me everything I needed to know. Still, I needed solid evidence to link him to Karen's crime. I returned to the marina with a metal detector and spent 2 hours searching the area around my dock. My patience paid off when I found something buried in the sandy soil beneath the wooden planks: a small flashlight engraved with Cape Acid, clearly a personalized item Karen had dropped during her midnight vandalism spree. The flashlight was smeared with the same red paint used on my boat, directly tying Karen to the crime scene. Combined with Hector's video footage and the distinctive gloves she'd worn, I now had overwhelming physical proof of Karen's guilt. But the most damaging evidence came from Tyler himself. The psychological toll of keeping Karen's secret had been eating away at him for weeks. When I showed him the engraved flashlight, he completely broke down in tears, confessing in stammering bursts that Karen had forced him to act as her lookout while she vandalized my boat. She had threatened to pin the entire crime on him if he ever spoke out, promising to pay his college tuition for his silencio but making it clear she would destroy his whole family if he betrayed her. Tyler had lived in terror for weeks, knowing Karen's capacity for ruin and realizing he was utterly at her mercy. Armed with Tyler's confession, Hector's video evidence, and the physical proof linking Karen to the crime scene, Sam and I requested an emergency hearing to present our findings before Karen's injunction could be approved. We had less than 48 hours to prepare a comprehensive defense, not just to save my boat but to expose Karen's long-standing pattern of fraud and harassment. What started as a neighborhood dispute was rapidly evolving into a battle to prove whether wealthy bullies could wield the legal system to destroy their neighbors with impunity. That night, as I sat on my boat, as I sat looking out over the calm water, thoughts of Tommy and Marcus weighed heavily on me. I knew that tomorrow's hearing wouldn't just decide the fate of my memorial to Thama, it would determine whether our entire community could remain free from Karen's reign of terror. The emergency hearing was set for 10 a.m., but Karen had one last surprise attack planned. At 6 a.m., I woke to my phone buzzing relentlessly with angry messages from clients and colleagues across the marine industry. Someone had posted detailed accusations on multiple boating forums and professional networks, falsely claiming I was operating illegally as a marine contractor without the proper licenses or insurance. The posts included what appeared to be official documents stating that my business permits had been revoked due to safety violations and fraudulent practices. According to these fabricated papers, I'd been banned from working on boats in 3 different counties and was under investigation by the state licensing board for endangering public safety with incompetent work. The fake scandal was perfectly timed and expertly disseminated across every platform where marine professionals might see it. My phone rang non-stop, clients demanding explanations, existing contracts cancelled, and potential customers withdrawing their interest. The most devastating blow came from Peterson Marine, a major yacht manufacturer planning to hire me for a $50,000 restoration project on a vintage racing yacht. We can't risk our company's reputation by associating with someone under investigation, their project manager told me regretfully. I'm sure you understand. I understood perfectly. Karen had found a way to strike at my livelihood directly, knowing financial pressure would break me faster than legal threats. The forged documents were sophisticated enough to fool anyone unfamiliar with the nuances of marine contractor licensing. Someone had taken genuine forms from the state licensing board and filled them with false information about my business, creating a twisted alternate reality where I was an incompetent criminal instead of a respected professional. The forger even went so far as to invent fake case numbers and reference real licensing officials, making the documents appear authentic to casual observers. This level of forgery required either expert skills or access to official templates and letterhead, a resources unlikely for a suburban HOA president acting alone, but well within reach of someone wealthy enough to hire professionals. As I drove to the courthouse that morning, my phone continued to buzz with frantic messages from my business partner, clients, and industry contacts. The fabricated scandal was spreading faster than I could respond, and every new message felt like another blow to my hard-earned reputation. I'd spent 15 years building credibility in the marine industry, and Karen had shattered it in a single morning, using lies, forgeries, and social media manipulation. Even if I won the fight over my boat, I risked losing everything else that mattered, my livelihood and ability to support myself. The courthouse hearing itself felt surreal. Karen arrived dressed as if for a charity gala, wearing a designer suit probably worth more than most people's monthly rent. She brought a new attorney, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who exuded the confidence of someone who won cases through intimidation rather than evidence. Karen's legal team presented a multimedia package, enlarged photos of my boat, environmental impact studies, and testimony from residents claiming to fear for their safety and property values. They painted me as a reckless threat to the entire community, harboring a derelict vessel that endangered both the environment and navigation in Bayside Cove. My defense, by contrast, was grounded in facts and not fear. Sam presented Hector's video footage showing Karen vandalizing my boat, Tyler's sworn confession about his role as her accomplice, and the physical evidence linking her directly to the scene. We had photos of the engraved flashlight and designer gloves found at the site, witness statements from neighbors who had seen Karen acting suspiciously that night, and documentation proving there had never been any environmental contamination near my boat. Most importantly, we had evidence that the inspector who filed the environmental violation had received payments from Karen's husband's construction company for favorable inspection reports on projects that should have failed, revealing a clear pattern of corruption. The judge was a stern-faced woman in her 60s who had clearly handled many frivolous lawsuits before. She listened patiently to both sides, then asked pointed questions that cut through the legal spin to focus on the actual evidence. When Karen's attorney claimed my boat posed an immediate environmental threat, the judge demanded specific contamination reports, which, of course, didn't exist beyond the fraudulent inspector's report. When they alleged my vessel was improperly moored, the judge requested relevant maritime regulations that clearly showed my boat was fully compliant. Most damaging of all, when pressed for proof that my professional licenses had been revoked, Karen's attorney was forced to admit their claims were based on anonymous reports, not official documentation from licensing authorities. The hearing took a dramatic turn when the judge announced she had received new evidence that morning. A sworn affidavit from Tyler Prescott detailing Karen's criminal activities. Tyler's statement didn't just describe how Karen had vandalized my boat while forcing him to act as her lookout. It exposed a wider pattern of harassment and intimidation against multiple residents in the community. His confession included specific dates, times, and methods of attacks Karen had ordered him to carry out against neighbors who opposed her policies or challenged her authority. The affidavit painted Karen as the mastermind behind a systematic campaign of terror designed to keep Bayside Cove under her control through fear and intimidation. Tyler's testimony devastated Karen's credibility, but her reaction was even more revealing. Instead of showing remorse or admitting guilt, she launched into a furious tirade, calling Tyler an ungrateful liar making up stories to save himself from prosecution. She claimed he acted without her knowledge or permission, only to immediately contradict herself by insisting my boat deserved to be vandalized because it was an eyesore ruining property values. Her outburst shattered the carefully crafted image of a concerned community leader. In reality, she was a vindictive bully who believed she had the right to destroy other people's property to serve her own agenda. The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. She dismissed all of Karen's claims against my boat, finding no evidence of environmental contamination, safety violations, or improper mooring. Karen was ordered to pay full restitution for the damage to my boat, plus my legal fees and court costs. More importantly, the judge referred the case to the district attorney's office for possible criminal charges related to vandalism, forged documents, false environmental reports, and conspiracy to commit multiple crimes. Karen left the courthouse in stunned silence, no longer the confident neighborhood queen who'd arrived expecting an easy win over what she assumed was just another intimidated resident. But despite my legal victory, the win felt hollow. Checking my phone, I saw dozens of new messages from clients and colleagues who had heard about the fabricated licensing scandal. Even though I had proven Karen's environmental claims false in court, the damage to my professional reputation would take months if not years to repair. Karen had lost this battle, but she had poisoned my ability to make a living in the marine industry. Driving home from the courthouse, it hit me. Winning in court was just the first step in a much longer war. Karen had shown she was willing to destroy innocent lives to maintain her power, and she likely had other weapons I hadn't yet uncovered. The real question was whether I had the strength and resources to survive whatever she tried next. The weeks after the hearing were a strange mix of victory and ongoing torment. Though I had defended my boat and exposed Karen's vandalism, my professional reputation lay in ruins. The fake licensing scandal had spread so widely through the marine industry that potential clients still called to confirm whether the accusations were true even after local news reported Karen's court defeat. I spent countless hours on the phone with industry contacts, boat owners, and licensing officials, explaining the situation and providing documents to prove my credentials were legitimate. It was exhausting, unrewarding work that left me feeling like I was trying to bail out a sinking ship with a teaspoon. Karen retreated from public view after her courtroom humiliation, canceling home meetings and avoiding her usual neighborhood power walks. But her absence didn't mean she was done. If anything, it suggested she was planning something bigger and more devastating. Through the neighborhood grapevine, I learned she'd hired a private investigator to dig into my past, hoping to find some scandal she could use against me. She also reached out to several of my former Navy colleagues, fishing for anyone who might speak negatively about my military service or character. Karen was relentless in her hunt for any weapon to use against those who challenged her authority or exposed her crimes. Then, my breakthrough came from the most unexpected source. Walter Grayson, a 70-year-old retiree 2 blocks away known mostly for his stray cat collection. One evening, he knocked on my door carrying a thick manila folder. "I've been saving these for the right moment," he said, a satisfied look on his face as if ready to reveal a long-held secret. Karen thinks she's been clever hiding her financial shenanigans, but she made one crucial mistake. She underestimated a retired. Walter Grayson, a retired accountant with plenty of time on his hands, had been quietly keeping detailed records of everything happening in our neighborhood. One evening, he spread his collection of documents across my kitchen table, revealing a shocking patterns of embezzlement and fraud that had been ongoing for nearly 5 years. The evidence Walter uncovered was staggering both in scale and audacity. Karen had been systematically siphoning money from the HOA's maintenance fund, using association credit cards to cover personal expenses like spa treatments, designer clothes, luxury vacations, and even weekly tennis lessons at the country club. She had authorized supposed emergency repairs on community property that were, in reality, upgrades to her own mansion, billing the HOA for landscaping, pool maintenance, and even a brand new roof installed exclusively on her home. Most brazenly, Karen had been paying herself an unauthorized salary as HOA president, writing monthly checks for administrative services that neither the board approved nor the residents were informed about. Walter's meticulous record showed Karen had stolen over $200,000 from the community fund over 5 years, some money that should have gone toward legitimate maintenance, landscaping, and infrastructure projects around Bayside Cove. Instead of fixing the aging water system or repaving the pothole-ridden roads, Karen treated the HOA treasury like her personal bank account. The evidence included credit card statements, canceled checks, receipts, and bank records clearly proving the fraudulent nature of her spending. Most damning of all were board meeting minutes where Karen had voted against hiring an independent auditor to review the association's finances, a decision that suddenly made perfect sense. But Walter's real smoking gun was a series of emails he'd obtained through his careful monitoring of the neighborhood's digital communications. These messages between Karen and Tyler laid bare her plans to vandalize my boat, including detailed instructions on which tools to use and how to inflict maximum psychological damage without being caught on security cameras. Karen had planned the attack like a military operation, scouting my property for weeks and timing the vandalism when she thought no one would be watching. The emails also revealed she'd orchestrated similar attacks on other residents who opposed her policies, making Tyler her personal enforcer in a wider campaign of intimidation and destruction designed to keep her absolute control over the community. Armed with Walter's explosive evidence, Sam Torres and I quickly arranged an urgent meeting with Detective Rodriguez, the seasoned investigator assigned to my vandalism case. Rodriguez, a 15-year veteran specializing in white-collar crime, immediately grasped the significance of the documents. Carefully photographing each piece of evidence, she said, "This isn't neighborhood drama anymore. We're looking at felony embezzlement, conspiracy, fraud, racketeering, and organized crime. The district attorney is going to love this case." She assured us Karen would be arrested within the week once the Financial Crimes Unit finished verifying the evidence and secured search warrants for Karen's home and business records. The irony wasn't lost on me. Karen's ultimate downfall wouldn't come from her direct attack on my boat, but from her own insatiable greed and arrogance. She'd been so focused on destroying me that she overlooked the methodical documentation of her crimes by a neighbor she dismissed as a harmless old man with too much time on his hands. Walter's patience and attention to detail had created an airtight case that would send Karen to prison for years and force her to repay every penny stolen from the community she claimed to serve. The woman who tried to ruin my life over a boat was about to lose everything for stealing from her own neighbors and attacking anyone who threatened to expose her corruption. As we prepared for Karen's inevitable arrest, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me here. 6 months ago, I was a quiet marine engineer, living peacefully with my memorial boat, bothering no one and asking only to be left alone with my memories of fallen friends. Karen's unprovoked attack had thrust me into a war one never wanted, but by defending myself, I'd uncovered a criminal enterprise victimizing our entire community for years. My boat, the memorial to Tommy and Marcus that Karen tried to destroy, had become the catalyst for exposing corruption affecting dozens of innocent families suffering in silence under her reign of terror. The morning of Karen's arrest, I sat on my boat's deck with a coffee, watching the sunrise paint the sky in brilliant golds and pinks. Tommy and Marcus would have appreciated the poetic justice, their memorial bringing a different kind of enemy to justice. Karen thought she could intimidate me into submission with vandalism and harassment, but she gravely underestimated someone trained by the United States Navy never to surrender in adversity. Today, she would finally learn that actions have consequences, and even wealthy bullies with political connections aren't above the law when their crimes are exposed to justice's harsh light. Karen's arrest happened on a Tuesday morning during her weekly tennis lesson at the exclusive Bayside Country Club. Detective Rodriguez and her team had deliberately waited until Karen was in the most public place possible, surrounded by her wealthy friends and social circle, to serve the warrant. According to Walter, who heard through a friend at the club's pro shop, Karen's reaction was spectacular. She screamed that there had been a terrible mistake, demanded to speak to the mayor immediately, and tried to call her attorney, all while being handcuffed in front of the entire tennis league. The image of Bayside Cove's self-appointed queen being led away in handcuffs by uniformed officers quickly spread through the community. News of Karen's arrest spread through the community faster than we gossip at a church bake sale, and everyone was eager for details. But the real drama was just beginning. Within hours, Tyler Prescott showed up at my front door, looking exhausted and disheveled. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unkempt, and his hands trembled as he asked to come inside to talk. I had been expecting this moment since his confession to the police about the boat vandalism, but nothing prepared me for the shocking truths he was about to reveal. "Mr. Harper," he said, sinking into a chair as if his legs had given out, "you don't know the full extent of what my aunt made me do over the past 2 years. The boat was just the tip of the iceberg." Tyler's confession felt like listening to a nightmare unfold, a nightmare that had consumed his life. Karen hadn't just coerced him into vandalizing my boat, she'd turned him into her personal enforcer, carrying out multiple attacks on neighbors who dared oppose her. Tires slashed, windows broken, mail stolen, fake evidence planted to implicate residents in HOA violations, and vicious rumors spread to ruin reputations and friendships, all under Karen's orders, all executed by Tyler. Terrified and trapped, the scale of Karen's criminal reign was staggering. Tyler described a calculated campaign of harassment targeting anyone who challenged her authority or questioned her increasingly autocratic rule. When the Henderson family protested the soaring HOA fees, their garden sprinklers were destroyed and paint stripper poured on their car. When Maria Santos ran for the HOA board promising transparency, Tyler dumped trash on her lawn and spray-painted obscene threats on her mailbox. Every mysterious act of vandalism in Bayside Cove over the past 2 years could be traced back to Karen's commands and Tyler's reluctant compliance. But the most disturbing revelation came when Tyler admitted Karen had planned to escalate the attacks. She asked him to plant drugs in my truck to get me arrested and discredited as a drug dealer. When that seemed too risky, she considered having him set fire to my boat's engine compartment, turning her environmental hazard claims into a deadly reality. Tyler refused both but faced brutal threats. She warned she would financially ruin his entire family if he didn't carry out her increasingly dangerous orders that could have caused serious harm or even death. Karen's grip on Tyler was more than psychological, it was financial. "She owns my parents' mortgage," he confessed, pale with fear. "She bought it from the bank after my dad lost his job last year. She made it clear she could call in the loan anytime and make my family homeless. My little sister is only 14. The thought of her living on the streets because of something I did or didn't do for Karina is unbearable. I was trapped with no way out that wouldn't hurt the people I love." Karen had systematically exploited financial vulnerabilities across the community, using them as leverage to force obedience to her criminal schemes. Tyler's decision to come forward wasn't just driven by guilt. He'd overheard Karen planning to scapegoat him entirely, blaming him for all the crimes while playing the innocent victim. She intended to claim he'd stolen HOA funds to finance his own vandalism spree. While she remained unaware, Karen was ready to send her own nephew to prison for decades to save herself. Armed with Tyler's detailed confession and insider knowledge, Detective Rodriguez expanded the case beyond embezzlement and vandalism. Charges now included conspiracy, racketeering, witness intimidation, extortion, organized crime, and multiple fraud counts of felonies carrying decades of prison time. Tyler's cooperation had transformed what started as a neighborhood dispute over a boat into a high-profile criminal case shaking Florida's legal system and HOA governance statewide. The community reacted with shock, outrage, and relief. Victims of mysterious damage finally understood the true cause. Supporters of Karen's crusade were horrified to learn they'd unknowingly enabled a sprawling criminal conspiracy. The neighborhood forum exploded with stories, disbelief, and calls for justice. Perhaps the most telling moment came when Karen's husband quietly filed for divorce and moved out of their mansion, taking their two perfectly groomed poodles with him. According to gossip, he had been completely unaware of his wife's crimes and devastated to learn their lavish lifestyle was bankrolled by stolen community funds. After 23 years of marriage, he realized he'd been living with a stranger capable of cruelty, manipulation, and deception. As Tyler finished his confession, "I felt a mix of satisfaction and deep pity. I felt a mix of satisfaction and sympathy. Satisfaction because justice was finally being served in full, but sympathy for Tyler, a young man who had been manipulated and threatened by someone who should have been guiding and protecting him, not using him as a weapon against innocent neighbors." Tyler would still face legal consequences for his actions, but in many ways, he was also a victim trapped by circumstances beyond his control and terrified of the fallout that could devastate his entire family. His bravery in coming forward finally allowed us to expose the full scope of Karen's crimes and ensure she would never harm anyone in our community again. The final court hearing was everything I had hoped for and more. Karen appeared in the defendant's dock, stripped of her usual designer clothes and wearing a plain orange county jail jumpsuit. Her once flawless hair was pulled back into a simple ponytail. The judge read the charges with solemn seriousness: first-degree embezzlement, conspiracy to commit fraud, racketeering, witness intimidation, organized criminal activity, and multiple counts of property destruction. Karen's defense attorney could only argue for leniency based on her supposed clean record and alleged cooperation, but the prosecution's case was rock solid. Detective Rodriguez testified about Karen's carefully hidden criminal enterprise, run under the guise of HOA business for nearly 5 years. Tyler took the stand calmly, recounting in detail each act of vandalism and intimidation he had been forced to carry out under her threats. Walter Grayson presented meticulous financial records, walking the court through 5 years of theft with charts and bank statements that made Karen's guilt undeniable. The most powerful testimony came from Karen's victims and neighbors who had suffered years of harassment without ever knowing who was behind it. Maria Santos told the court about finding her car vandalized after announcing her run for the HOA board. The Henderson family described the costly mysterious damages they endured. One by one, the victims shared their stories, painting a clear picture of a once peaceful neighborhood terrorized by the very person who should have been its protector. When it came time for sentencing, the judge's words were firm and condemning. "Mrs. Prescott," he said, looking her in the eye, "you have abused a position of trust to enrich yourself at the expense of your neighbors, while terrorizing anyone who questioned you. You corrupted a young man who trusted you and destroyed the peace of an entire community. This court sentences you to 8 years in state prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. You are ordered to pay full restitution totaling $450,000. The financial breakdown was staggering: $8,500 for damage to my boat, $200,000 stolen from the HOA treasury over 5 years, $150,000 in property damage to neighbors' homes and vehicles, and $91,500 in legal fees and penalties. Karen's criminal actions had cost our community nearly $500,000, so without even counting the emotional trauma that would take years to heal. As Karen was led away in handcuffs, I felt a complicated mix of relief that this nightmare was over, satisfaction that justice was served, and sadness that it took so much pain and destruction to get there. Her victims had suffered in silence for years, and Tyler's life had been derailed by the very person who should have been guiding him toward better choices. In the aftermath, Bayside Cove saw unexpected changes. The HOA was restructured with new leadership and a commitment to transparency. Sam Torres was elected president, bringing her legal expertise and dedication to fairness. The community began to heal, coming together in ways impossible during Karen's reign of terror, which had sown fear and division throughout our once peaceful neighborhood. My boat became a local landmark after the trial made regional headlines. Children would walk by with their parents, asking about the famous boat that helped expose the corrupt HOA president. I started giving informal tours, sharing naval history and stories of my military service and the friends I had lost. The vessel Karen tried to destroy had become a source of community pride and education. Tommy and Marcus would have been proud to know their memorial was bringing people together and teaching the next generation about sacrifice. Thanks to the financial settlement, I was able to restore my boat to even better condition than when I first bought her. I replaced damaged equipment, upgraded navigation systems, and added safety features while keeping her classic military look. The insurance settlement for damage to my business reputation covered lost income from Karen's harassment, as well as compensation for stress and professional harm. 6 months after Karen began serving her sentence, I hosted a community barbecue on my restored boat to celebrate the return of peace to Bayside Cove. Neighbors who had been too afraid to speak during Karen's oppressive rule gathered on deck, sharing food and stories while watching Florida's stunning sunset. Hector grilled his legendary fish, Walter entertained with stories from his accounting days, and Sam gave a heartfelt speech about standing up to bullies and corruption. Tyler came with his parents, and his sincere apology to everyone he'd wronged was deeply moving. He had received community service and probation, but more importantly, he'd learned valuable lessons about integrity and protecting others. His family's mortgage was transferred to a legitimate bank, freeing them from Karen's control and allowing Tyler to return to college with new determination. The most memorable moment came when Mrs. Henderson raised her glass in a toast to my boat. Her voice carried across the water, to Nate's boat and to the man who refused to let a bully destroy something precious. You showed us that sometimes, you have to fight for what's right even when it's easier to give up. The applause that followed felt like vindication for all the stress, legal fees, and sleepless nights I had endured. As the party wound down, I found myself alone on the deck, looking out over the calm water, reflecting on this incredible journey. 9 months ago, I was just a quiet marine engineer living peacefully with my memorial boat. Karen was the unchallenged queen of Bayside Cove. Tonight, she was behind bars, and I was surrounded by friends who understood the power of standing together against injustice. Walter was the last to leave, lingering to share some final words of wisdom. "You know, Nate," he said, looking up at the restored boat, "Karen thought she could break you by attacking something you loved. Instead, she gave you the strength to expose her crimes and save our community. Sometimes, what's meant to destroy us ends up making us stronger." Watching Walter walk home, I realized how true that was. That night, I sat in my boat's pilot house, running my fingers over the gleaming controls and thinking of Tommy and Marcus. They had died fighting enemies who used violence and intimidation. I had won my battle against someone who used lawsuits and harassment for the same evil purpose. He had different weapons, Same desire to control and destroy others for personal gain. My boat was no longer just a memorial. It had become a symbol of resistance against bullying and a reminder that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when they refuse to surrender their principles. Comment below and share any horror stories you've experienced. Something tells me Karen's story isn't the only one out there, and who knows, maybe your drama could be the next incredible story I get to tell.